All right, so we're here just talking about Joe Biden as a politician, a human being, and what his chances are in the 2020 elections and in the primary. But you had some thoughts just about Joe Biden, the person, beforehand.
Yeah, I think clearly he's an important historical figure of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century. Whether that continues another decade, I'm a little skeptical. But he's someone he does have a very interesting life story as well as public story or professional story as a diplomat, and
So we talked
obviously
about, like, one of the youngest senators, yep, maybe at the time the youngest. He was like in his late 20s or something, I think, when he was certainly in office in city council, and then
I think you have to be 30 to be a senator.
I
I
think
forget,
yeah.
but he also
He was one of the youngest.
and I saw he was one of the youngest to cast 10,000 votes in the Senate, and he was a junior senator from Delaware for an incredibly long time because the senior delegate senator from Delaware had been there for ages too. It's an interesting place to choose to be a politician, Delaware, because the Senate votes are like a couple 100,000 votes for the Senate races. So you're dealing with a much smaller battlefield.
Yeah, it's probably one of the most overrepresented states. Like Wyoming, for example, has one congressman, and they don't even have enough people to get up to the population level that other states have for one congressman, basically. But Delaware is probably similar, where it's very overrepresented for the population. But there's a lot of banks center themselves in Delaware for favorable banking rates.
At the center.
Yeah, but so we were talking a little bit before about just Biden's character and whether he's been kind of a maverick. So we talked a little bit about his friendship with John McCain. I contend that there was several things over his time that he did stand alone on, though. I don't think he's really been a super big political someone that's always gone with the party. Traditionally, I think he has gone with the party, but that's just genuine Joe. I think
how you put it before, I'm paraphrasing, but I think you kind of nailed it. It was, you contrasted him with someone like Hillary Clinton, where Joe Biden seems to have the freedom to go off script and be himself, whereas Hillary Clinton seemed quite manufactured every step of the way.
Yeah, Joe Biden's like come on, man, that's not true, or he's not like Hillary would be like, you come on, man, just trying to be more genuine and laid back and everything. That's just not who Hillary is, but she tries to portray that sometimes. Right. Joe's just who he is. He's
Now that said, we're pretty early into this recording, and we should establish that a few months ago I wagered $300 to win $100 on whether Joe Biden wins the Democratic nomination.
Right.
That was before he had announced even running. He was polling at about 3-1, so it seemed like a pretty fair bet for both of us at the time.
You think you're ahead now? I think I'm
quadruple. I'll quadruple the bet.
You'll quadruple the bet? Okay.
Pretty much.
I mean, I'd have to think about it a little bit, but I think I'm sitting fair odds right now.
It's pretty fair.
Yeah, I think it's fair. Although you want to quadruple, will you give me better odds?
No, I think like it should be 500 to win 1,500.
So same 3-1 odds.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Not 4-1, 5-1. I don't know. I think it's such a crowded field right now that it's he's got a good lane. The thing is everybody in that debate the other day, I mean, they're all tacking to the left, and he still is pretty much simpatico with them, but he's a little more mainstream, and he's trying to kowtow to the moderate wing of the party, the kind of Barack Obama wing of the party, the establishment wing of the party. And that's the complete opposite of what the Republicans were. The Republicans had all of the moderate heavyweights in that time. So they had Marco Rubio, they had Chris Christie, John Kasich, Jeb Bush, of all people, all trying to be the sane, moderate Republican. And you have Donald Trump just having the biggest portion of the plurality of, the Tea Party-esque wing of the party. He basically stole that from Ted Cruz, right? Whereas it's opposite in the Democratic Party. Now you have everybody trying to see how far left they could be, actually, and who's the biggest liberal champion. And you have really, one guy, Joe Biden, who's taking on the moderate wing of the party. So you got all these people splitting up the left side, and one guy in the moderate. I'm going to bet on the plurality and the mainstream candidate wins. And I think my odds are pretty good for that.
That was fascinating analysis, I think. Well said. I do think.
You want to take your bet back?
Well, no, I mean, I'm a gambler. Oh, someone's calling me. Let me, sorry about this.
No worries. I need to put my phone on airplane mode, probably.
Yeah, silent time.
Yeah, putting it on airplane.
Okay, well, at least these conversations are genuine and not super manufactured. Obviously.
So I'll give you maybe a unconventional argument as well. So I watched the rest of that debate in the last couple days, Joe Biden's debate, and so you sent me a couple videos of him kind of hem and hawing around, and I definitely think he was not super clear. But one thing I did notice is that I think he got better and better as the debate went on. He was stumbling around a little flat-footed, and frankly,
excuse me, my time is up.
I don't know, man.
I mean, he's for decades he's been a gaffe master, but it's because he's willing to go off script, right? He's willing to kind of speak from the heart, so to speak.
He didn't really do that during the debate, though.
He didn't really do that during the debate.
Yeah, he was just not clear. And so, everybody was like, oh, he did so bad. Kamala Harris really hit him so hard. Yeah, she did, but I think that definitely helped her a lot, because it showed, she can stand up to Biden. She can be a big candidate and take him on. And she's fighting in a very liberal part of the argument there, trying to say that he is, over his political career, fraternizing and dealing with segregationists, and, that's not something to be proud of. So it's a very liberal territory for her. So it works to her. But I don't think he really hurt himself in that exchange. In fact, that was probably, to me, a turning point where he actually took offense to it, and he kind of became, he went back from talking point Joe Biden, which he fumbled all over the place in the first half of the debate and was very unclear. And that was like taking a shot at him, and it kind of woke him up to me. I thought he could have been better prepared for that attack, but he also answered it kind of the best that you're going to answer that, he was trying to deal with them and bridge gaps. And you can't bridge gaps with people by not talking. That's part of one of the reasons this podcast, we're trying to do it, right? Civil disagreements. You have to engage people that you don't agree with. And that's perfect for his message. That's perfect for his ethos. So to me, I don't think he really got super hurt by that, because he delivered what his argument was going to be. But through the rest of the debate, I thought he got a lot better. I thought his arguments on climate change and how they fought for the Paris Accord, and he tied himself to Obama better. I thought he got better and better as the debate went on. So I don't really think all this conventional wisdom of how bad he did and he wasn't prepared. Sure, he could have been better, but it wasn't like a disaster for him by any means. it's going to elevate other lower candidates just being on the stage and having publicity and having an opportunity to speak.
Interesting. To a large extent,
you thought he did bad.
But
you thought he
at
did
the time, but that's also because I do think these debates are largely very commercialized by the cable networks that they're on, and it plays into what are going to create the sound bites and monopolize the narrative for the next couple days. And from that perspective, I thought he did bad. What I think you're saying is in the long-term perspective, he comes off as probably the narrative he wants, which is diplomatic and wise. He even said, which as I heard it, it sounded ridiculous, but maybe it supports what you're saying. He said, if I'm president, nothing will fundamentally change. Which I thought was kind of a funny thing to say, but like he's kind of saying like, I'm going to bring stability back to the White House.
Yeah, we're going to go along the same line. The economy's still going to be good because that's the, jobless unemployment rate's great, job creation's great, interest rates are low. We're sitting pretty good in the economy right now. So nobody wants to let's come in and disrupt that. Although some of the liberal candidates would say we do need major disruption, but I don't know that the average person thinks we need major disruption. I think they think we need to get a little better, but they want a stable choice. But to get back to what you are saying, I think, yes, Joe's playing the long game. And as long as he's delivering messages that, show his ethos, his character, and what he's about in trying to moderate and bridge gaps, I think that's only going to really solidify him as the moderate candidate. And all these other people can fight over getting their 5 seconds on the narrative news shows for a week or two. And that's great for them. But in the next debate, it may be Elizabeth Warren getting all that spotlight and Kamala Harris is out. So Kamala's going to go up to 10% and Warren's going to, go up to 7%. And then next time they're going to flip and Kamala's going to be at 7% and Elizabeth's going to be at 10%. That doesn't get them very far, as long as Joe is steady and straight down his character and his ethos, which I don't think he can really be otherwise. I don't think he's the type of person that is going to be the new Joe Biden. You're not going to get, how some candidates they're trying to show their personal side, and this month they're highlighting this about them, and they're reshaping their character. You're not going to get that from Joe Biden. He is who he is. He's going to run on his character, and you're going to take him or leave him at the end of the day. And I think the long game will play out better for him.
I think it's interesting. I've got a couple notes.
So you were digging into some research on Biden's history and some backstory, right? So
and looking for dirt, and what negative things would be brought up in a campaign that you might not know about today. And then there's a lot of compelling history as well. He's this about his history. He's got a compelling family story. The fact that I think it was as he was it running for he was running for office, and his wife at the time got in a car accident. She passed away. His daughter passed away.
Yeah.
And his 2 sons were injured. I think Joe Biden's a very driven person. He's someone who, at an early age, I think he even publicly committed himself to being president of the United States one day. At an early age, his grades were pretty awful, but he was always a leader in what he was doing. From the research that I did, and of course, he's got an incredibly long Senate history, 1972 to 2008.
He's been a pretty big leader. I mean, he's got, for better or worse, his name's attached to the crime bill and, some other significant pieces of legislation that, did end up passing. What he said a a couple interesting things in the debate that he helped to get passed or whatever. That escape me right now, but I mean, he's had leadership roles and he's had success as a legislator over his time. You can't say that for anybody else on that stage. Granted, we're in a different time where the divisions are probably bigger than they were in the 80s. We got more stuff done bipartisanly before, if that's a word. But nobody else on that stage can say they are accomplished at legislating at all.
Huh. Yeah, I mean, few. There's a couple Senate candidates who have a bit of a history, but no one compares to.
I don't think anybody on that stage. I'm trying to think. Bernie Sanders has been, right. In the Congress, probably close to as long as Joe Biden. If anybody, who's the longest other serving legislator on that stage? Bernie. I mean, Jill.
I mean, they're both
Gillibrand, Amy Klobuchar, but
right.
They've never gotten any legislation passed of any means. Joe Biden was
also, as you know, it's happened, of course, but it's quite difficult to be someone with a Senate history running for president. That makes it quite challenging, and you have got a record that exposes you to attacks. Keep in mind, Joe Biden's run for president in 1988, 2008, and he's running for, what do they call it, a hat trick if you lose the third time?
Yeah.
Right. So, that's something to.
Only Mitt Romney will supersede him.
That who?
Only Mitt Romney will someday supersede him, perhaps. Who knows?
Right. And so that's like one attack they use against Biden, where they say he was pandering to an African-American community, saying like that Mitt Romney was going to put you all back in chains, like, and kind of outrageous statement that Biden has a history of doing things like that.
Yeah. So let's talk about that for a second, because, we were talking over text real briefly about like his NATO comments. So he says if Trump is reelected, NATO is going to be gone in 4 or 5 years, right? And I think that's wrong. I don't think Trump really wants to do that. But
what evidence even indicates that Trump? It's just like kind of a partisan attack. That's
So it's there's like a grain of truth or to it, where Trump wants the European countries to take more of a lead and step back from his commitment a little more, or he wants them to pay more, and if they don't pay more, what's the repercussions? Trump's probably going to say, well, I'm going to pull out or pull back resources, and that could upend NATO, right? So there's now, whether that's a lot of steps in order for that to happen.
Right, in 4 or 5 years.
I guess my point, though, is like, Joe says those kinds of things, but I don't think they're, Trump says plenty of things that are in a similar line of this is going to happen. If this person won, if Hillary had won, the stock market would be down 40%, he says plenty of things. So that kind of comment is just a common political thing to rile up the base. And I personally don't care for that as much. I'd rather have somebody be truthful and moderate and say what the likelihoods of things happening, rather than like the worst case scenario. But I understand it. I understand what he's doing. It's a common Democratic attack line that Trump is undermining NATO and he's giving too much to Russia, blah, blah, blah. It's not, it may be a little bit out there, but it's not out there for the Democratic primary. So I don't think it's going to hurt him at all there.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, Biden also opposed he's made a lot of like incorrect decisions in hindsight. I think he opposed the first Iraq war in the 90s.
He did, yeah.
And then
that was one thing we talked about before this podcast started, that's one of those issues where, I'd have to go back and look. I'd be interested to see what the vote was in the Senate for the first Iraq War, but I feel like that was an unconventional position at the time because I'm pretty sure it probably passed pretty overwhelmingly. So to be on the minority side in that circumstance was probably a little more of a standalone type of vote. Although I could be wrong. I'd like to go back and actually see what the votes were. But I would contend that that's an instance where Joe Biden's actually just being true to what he thinks is the right thing, which is admirable. Maybe it's wrong, but at least he is admirable, I guess.
I think you're being charitable to him. I think a lot of his decisions are politically calculated. I don't always think he's just being like.
No politician is. I always like who is it? It's oh gosh, I can't remember who's the gay congressman. He helped pass the financial bill.
Barney Frank.
Barney Frank, yes. Barney Frank always had a great line that I loved when he was on like shows that I'd see. He's like, "Oh, shocking! There's a politician taking politics into account."
Right.
Yeah, there's going to be political judgments that are made. You have to do the best you can with, you're meandering through your party and the opposition. And
come on, folks.
Yeah, and maybe that's I wish it wasn't as much that way. I appreciate the politician to me that does that and takes a stand against their own party when they feel it's the right thing to do. And Joe Biden historically probably hasn't done that a ton, but he goes off script quite a bit, and he seems, genuinely like he's, giving his genuine opinion more often than not, I would say.
I also think, he's been near the center of the reins of power for half a century. I mean, leader of Senate Foreign Relations, leader of Senate Judiciary, Vice President of the United States, just a super power player. And he crafts this persona of being like a boy from Scranton, Pennsylvania, even though his family left Scranton when he was 10 years old. And many of us remember being 9 years old. But
it's pretty masterful though, right?
But it's right. It's the game of politics, right? And I think, like almost everybody on planet Earth, probably they think they're a good person.
Yeah.
I think Joe Biden probably has a self-image of being very diplomatic, having an incredible network and a history of decades of building trust with people. Right? But then if you look into his background, there's some concerning things that are, in my opinion, pretty underreported, that I certainly think as a primary got more heated or as the GOP starts to focus on Biden, it's going to be hard for him, I think, to defend some of these things. Some of them.
Go ahead.
Yes, some of them are fair attacks, I think. Others are just going to be your typical political stuff. Let's just start with that, right? In law school, he published a law review article, 15 pages long. 5 of the pages were plagiarized.
Right. Okay? So that upended his first presidential campaign, right? That was
part of it, right?
Yeah.
He also, plagiarized a speech during that campaign in '88, and in that speech, he even fabricated his own family history because he was plagiarizing what the other guy had said. So he's like talking about his family and my upbringing, and it's like what that guy said. It's not even your family, Joe. Okay, so
I'd have to go back and see that. I don't know. That was all. He lost one presidential campaign because of that. Does it still matter? I don't know.
Right, but so then
plagiarized her nomination speech from Michelle Obama. So
I would say that might be one of the worst things she's done so far, and this is not the worst things Joe Biden has done. Okay.
Okay. So that's
Right?
yeah, that's an old issue that he'll probably have to answer for again. He's got a lot to answer for.
A
It's
lot.
not going to be
So
an easy campaign for him.
he attacks Trump for getting deferments from Vietnam for bone spurs. It's a common attack against the president, right? Joe Biden got numerous deferments from serving in Vietnam for student deferments, understandable, okay? But then when his selective service came up, he got another deferment claiming teenage asthma, okay? Got compassion for asthma, I have it myself. Joe Biden, however, was the star halfback and wide receiver on his varsity high school football team and was on the baseball team. And we haven't heard those attacks against his military, or at least I hadn't heard those attacks on his background before, right?
Yeah.
That is what it is. I actually, we could go. It's another topic whether people should be compelled to serve in a military setting or not.
Yeah, and he had a pretty young family too. I don't know if that played into it at the time or not, but yeah, and Vietnam War,
but he also had a political trajectory, and so should
he be critical over deferments?
He lied, right? He lied about his history a lot, and I think from my perspective, it seems like he's got a political trajectory. He understands how power works, right? A lot of people didn't anticipate records being kept or their history being dug up because of the internet allowing so many researchers and things like that. But things like he claimed he graduated in the top half of his law school class. I think he was in the bottom 10%. He said that he had a full scholarship. He didn't. He said he had 3 college degrees. He falsely claimed that he marched in the civil rights movement. Those are things that are like,
I don't know,
typical politics. But is that where we are in 2019?
Yeah, so you can go with Trump, back to Trump. I mean, everybody always puts themselves in the best light possible, right? So they try to highlight or, kind of self-aggrandize themselves over things that they did and make it bigger than it was. I mean, look at Trump. I mean, he always talks about how he's self-made and his dad gave him a small loan of $1 million. Well, that massive New York Times article that came out several months ago basically said no, his dad was like a humongous lifeline of credit and everything for a long time, and certainly when he got into financial straits. So is he self-made? No, his dad helped him way more than Trump would ever lead on. So that's a similar thing. But what's Trump's position is he's just going to keep saying the same thing and say, nope, it's fake news. I'm self-made. My dad gave me a small loan and I built this $1 billion empire by myself. So some of these things, I think they're in the same league, and all Joe Biden's probably going to do is I don't know. He's not going to do what Trump does completely. He'll probably try to find some kind of middle ground or apologize like he just did for, some of the things he's done or his misstatements, more so than Trump will. But if he didn't, he'd probably be overall fine. I guess his problem, I'm just thinking out loud here, his problem may be the Elizabeth Warrens of the world who, well, she's got misstatements too. So they're all ripe to it, but all of these candidates are going to pick apart every misstatement, every little thing, and try to pile on. But if Joe just takes the Trumpian line and says, hey, I'm true to who I am, I'm Joe Biden, I'm staking out a moderate position, kind of like I said earlier, where he's just staking out that ground and he's not going to deviate from it and plow ahead. I don't know that all of that's going to really, it'll take its toll, but in the end, I don't know that those little things like that are going to add up to matter that much.
Yeah. I mean,
here's the thing.
if he
He's always
faces
got the argument. So they said the other day, they were like, well, he should have tied himself to Barack Obama more so. And I think one of his lines after the debate was, hey, uh, our country's first African American president, Barack Obama, vetted me pretty heavily if I was a racist. I trust his judgment way more than I trust anybody else's. He's got the best judgment of anybody in the last half century of democratic American politics. So if Barack Obama said I'm good, all things are good. Plow ahead, stay the course.
again, just like political statement, in my opinion, not like necessarily reality.
Right.
The decision
You can
to
just
choose
maintain that line like Trump does, man. Just
the decision to choose Joe Biden, I'm sure, had a lot to do with his character, but also was a political decision to help Barack Obama with the white working class.
if you're Joe Biden, you're never gonna say Barack chose this on political grounds. He is the best judgment maker in the last half century of democratic America.
Joe Biden?
This is what Joe Biden would say. Barack
About
Obama has the best political judgment of anybody in the last half century in democratic politics, and he doesn't make political decisions. He chooses on character and what's right, and he chose me. That's all he has to keep saying.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to ignore Joe Biden's past to believe that, or at least be charitable to him and say he's
Barack Obama examined all that.
Sure, I mean, but so Trump's family has been under considerable scrutiny in the last couple of years since the campaign started, right?
Yeah.
Almost relentless attacks against Kushner and Ivanka and Don Jr., Eric. It's relentless, I'd say. The media attention, if it was equal for Joe Biden, if it was fair, would be disastrous for Joe Biden.
So you're talking about the Hunter Biden story, right? So why don't you
ongoing story? Yeah.
Yeah. Why don't you illuminate that? Because you probably, I know it. I read that, but you probably have it clearer than I do.
So Joe Biden said that Hunter Biden is the most honorable and decent person I know. I think Joe Biden is in an incredibly difficult position as someone who's driven towards power, but also cares about his family. To have a son like Hunter Biden has got to be really challenging. And I have compassion for Hunter Biden too. It's not easy to be born into a family like the Bidens, I'm sure.
Yeah.
That said, if the media paid attention to Hunter with the same scrutiny as they do the Trumps, I think America would be absolutely outraged. Okay, and here's why. Hunter Biden is the managing partner at an investment firm. He also was an adjunct professor at Georgetown, and a lawyer, and a lobbyist, and a policymaker under President Clinton. Okay? When Hunter Biden was 43 years old, just a little bit older than the age where you can enlist in the military, I think a personal and political decision was made by the family for Hunter Biden to enlist in the Navy Reserves. And so someone secured a special waiver for Hunter after the age of, maybe it's 40, but he was 43 at the time, to be able to enlist in the Navy Reserves. Okay? He also got a special waiver to just be part of like the press office. So you don't have to do anything serious, but you get to say you served your country. Okay? 1 month.
Press is very important, Jason.
What's that?
Press is very important.
Right. So 1 month after Hunter Biden began serving in the Navy Reserves, he tested positive for cocaine in his system and was not even dishonorably discharged, just administratively discharged from the
Naval Reserve.
This is the tip of the iceberg. Okay. 1 month after that, his management consulting firm, 1 month after being administratively removed from the Navy for testing positive for cocaine in his first month of service to our country, he was then appointed, his management consulting firm was then appointed to the board of directors for a Ukrainian natural gas company to be paid over $1 million a year. And Hunter Biden never had anything to do with Ukraine or natural gas prior to that. But his father was vice president of the United States, I believe, at the time. Also heavily embroiled in Ukraine and Russia conflict. Really disturbing. In addition to that, Hunter Biden, his consulting firm, also does business with the Bank of China, who I would argue is the United States' #1 adversary. And I don't say enemy, but adversary. We're definitely in a competitive role. And it's way different than our situation with Russia, so to speak. But it is disturbing that a politician with half a century of service to the United States, who's also himself a multimillionaire and got an $8 million book deal and all sorts of stuff, has his son Hunter with this experience in these positions for this amount of money with countries. Let me just continue. I'm sorry to ramble, but from an intelligence perspective, to have the ability to have your tentacles on someone like Hunter Biden gives you incredible leverage with a father who cares deeply about his family. Yeah. Incredible leverage. So let me just conclude with this. Hunter Biden just got married a few weeks ago to someone that he had met 10 days before his wedding day.
Is that true, really?
True.
10 days.
Before that, Hunter Biden was married to a lady named Kathleen, who's filed for divorce, or has divorced, obviously. And here's what she said in her filing in the D.C. Superior Court. She claimed that Hunter spent, quote, extravagantly on drugs, alcohol, prostitutes, strip clubs, and gifts for women with whom he had sexual relations. Okay? He cheated on Kathleen with Haley Biden, his sister-in-law of his deceased brother who died in 2016.
Right.
Okay? People make their own choices in life, and it's hard to judge people. But what I find interesting is the lack of scrutiny of this type of behavior in the face of like the ridiculous scrutiny that the Trump family has been under, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Which I'm all for scrutiny, but I'm not for the omission of scrutiny.
So I think that, this is going to be an issue. I think you've sent me some, articles of people already asking questions and digging into this. I think the Ukraine, Rudy Giuliani was like going to go over to Ukraine to investigate it for Trump. You better believe that Trump's going to make an issue of this. So there's not going to be any lack of scrutiny when you have one of the biggest Twitter accounts and megaphones, the president, probably going to be talking about this. I don't think you should be worried about a lack of scrutiny. This is all public information, obviously, that Trump's team is already probably going through, waiting, deciding how they're going to attack it. So, are you really worried that there's going to be a lack of scrutiny here?
No, I just think there has been a lack of scrutiny. The events I just talked about were in the last few years.
Yeah.
Right? This guy was our vice
wasn't
president.
in office for the last couple of years, and he's still.
Biden was vice president from 2008 to 2016.
No, but you said in the last couple of years. But yeah, so I think at the time the whole Ukraine position, being on the board or whatever of that company, that's definitely a very well. One of the articles you said talked about a trip that they took to China, and supposedly no business had taken place on that trip. But some of the business relationships that Hunter had formed with like these Chinese companies or whatever. He introduced one of them to his dad at some point, but it was like a very one-off social interaction. So yeah, that, and supposedly in that article, at least it said there was like State Department officials kind of warning them like, hey, you're kind of skirting on the edge here. You probably gotta, watch what you're doing here. So it definitely sounds like people were raising concerns. The Ukraine thing, I don't know how much concerns there were. Here's what I would say though is I think that needs to be.
Have you gotten $1 million a year job yet?
No. So I 100% agree. There should definitely be scrutiny and see what
1 month after getting kicked out of the Navy, after being in the Navy for 1 month.
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody that would say. How
does that happen?
Pretty much unquestionable the reason he got that job, right? I mean, it's on its face. It seems pretty clear the only reason he got that was he's the vice president's son. Seems pretty clear. Now, he's going to have to answer for that, right? Now, but here's my question, though. Is that really going to deflect on Joe Biden? Joe Biden didn't make the decision to take that job necessarily. In fact, I think Joe Biden in one of those articles said his son maybe asked him for advice, and he just told him something like, you do what you think is best, Hunter.
No. Joe Biden publicly bragged about getting the Ukrainian government to sack the prosecutor who was looking into the company his son just became on the board of. How convenient. Isn't that cool? Like, you're so powerful after half a century that you can do that and then brag about it and be like, and my family were multimillionaires and we're doing public service. My whole life, I'm a boy from Scranton doing public service. And, but excuse me, I'm going to get into my Bentley and I'll talk to you guys later.
Yeah, I don't think Joe Biden's, I mean, he's a millionaire, but he's also old. Like, to me, if you're not a millionaire by that age, you've probably, haven't saved correctly and stuff. So, and he's got a big character. He's a big public figure. So I think, Bernie Sanders is a multimillionaire too. All of these people, through their following, especially nowadays, can leverage their personalities.
Because the reality is
they understand a version of Kim Kardashian.
They understand the nature of power and that it requires resources. But they have this public persona that masks over that, whereas Trump was in the private sector, had this bravado and gravitas and power, and was the same person as he ran for office, saying, you do this by understanding the nature of power and strength. Whereas a guy like Joe Biden says, come on, folks, listen up. Let's just hold hands and discuss this, or we'll bomb the shit out of you. But we can all be friends at the end of the day. Vote for me. I'm just a boy from Scranton. I understand what it's like to be in the unions. I get it. I get it.
Well, it's two different. It's a little bit, and maybe we kind of, I put this on like a text to you or whatever. It's a different take on how you administer your own power, right? Biden's doing it in a much more subtle, under the radar way, a more subtle threats perhaps. But
does he have his finger on the pulse of 2019?
What's that?
Is that where the Democratic primary is for 2019?
No, well, probably not. It's more.
It hasn't been, in fact, for any time he's run for president. I don't think he's ever won I actually don't think he's ever come in second place in a primary before.
Don't know. I'd have to go back and look. I would think in 2008. Yeah, I don't know if he got that high because there was a lot of people in that race. But that's fine. I mean, he's going to have to prove it, and he's got a lot of compound interest that he's built up, over years and being vice president. So we're going to see. Now, but to get back, though, to finish up on that topic of Hunter, is if Joe basically says, hey, Hunter makes his own decisions. He's a grown man. He's a grown ass man. He makes his own decisions. I told him, do what you think is right. Granted, maybe he bragged about getting an accomplishment that he did, and maybe that lined up with Hunter. But if he's able to say, I didn't tell Hunter to take that job, I didn't ask anybody to give him that job. I don't really know anything about the process. Hunter handled it all himself. He's going to have to kind of answer for that, but I didn't have any strings pulled for him, blah, blah, blah. Is that really
Right, but I mean, is that,
Biden if that's provable? If
does
that's where
anyone believe that?
I mean, I think
Does
it's
anyone
kind of like
believe
the
that?
it's kind of like the whole Clinton Foundation thing, man, where you know you give money and all these countries and people give money and go to fundraisers for Bill Clinton while he's post president because Hillary is a sitting senator or sitting secretary of state and or going to run for president again someday. So you're going to curry favor. I mean, I think you can hate the game, but we're still playing the game, right? Like I hate that. I don't like it. I think Biden's going to have to answer for that, and he will. There's certainly going to be scrutiny. Trump's going to bring scrutiny to it. But I wouldn't be worried that that's going to be a non-scrutinized issue. And I think at the end of the day, Joe's going to be pretty genuine when he comes out and just says, man, Hunter's had some problems. Like, I think all of us can relate that we have somebody in our family that's gone through drug and alcohol abuse or, had deaths in the family. I mean, we haven't had a shortage of tragedies in our family.
Right.
Hunter's,
And all these years of public service that, I've given my heart and soul to the United States of America, and he just got really, really lucky to get that contract for over $1 million a year to be on the board of directors of a Ukrainian company.
I don't know that he would say lucky. I don't think he would answer it that way. Yeah, I mean, he's got an impressive record. You do have to admit, though, or like a history. So you said he went to Georgetown. Did he have? I don't know if he had high marks or whatever, but he's
an adjunct professor at Georgetown.
Right. So
that's awesome, man. That's one of the most powerful schools on planet Earth.
Yeah,
that's amazing for a cocaine abuser. Pretty amazing.
So, I mean, he's going to come under scrutiny, but I don't know that we.
Why would the mother of his children? Why would she claim that he spends extravagantly on drugs, alcohol, prostitutes, strip clubs, and gifts for women with whom he has sexual relations?
She could be an angry divorcee.
Trying to get marital assets, for sure. But it does comport with the history. I think there might even be a possession of crack cocaine in his history, too.
Yeah. I mean, he certainly sounds troubled, man. And I think I've seen Biden even say that in some interviews where he's like.
And I'm all for the
time.
I love redemption stories. What I don't like is political corruption stories.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I don't see this as a redemption story. I see it as a political corruption story. And I don't want to cast the sins of the father on the son.
Or sins of the son on the father.
Or the sins of the son on the father, thank you. But it's really hard to ignore in American culture. You see it everywhere where, like I started off saying, everyone thinks, or almost everyone believes they're a good person and they're doing what's right. And they're defending their interests or their values. But I think public service for many generations has been abused to a large extent. I think the center of power is not democratized in our country. It's really almost a party stranglehold together, and currently together with the media on everybody's values, and everyone's whipped up into this frenzy of hatred. And I kind of am hopeful that 2016 election was a paradigm shift in how Americans are starting to view their elected officials. And there would be some sort of backlash against political favors and scrutiny of this type of behavior. And I think it's good to scrutinize Trump and his family, and monitor everything, because I want to, like Trump, drain the swamp. Whether he's accomplishing that or not, history hopefully will show us. But I am kind of sick of this generational, in my opinion, political abuse and abuse of power.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that's a big reason that Trump got elected, right, was people did think he was going to go in and drain the swamp, and he had no political ties. He had no, ties to the establishment of the Republican Party. So, there's definitely a streak of, the anti-Clinton, lifetime politician, anti-Bush lifetime politician sentiment, which led to Trump's election. Personally, though, if you're asking the average voter, and certainly the average maybe independent voter, do you think Donald Trump is corrupt or not? And do you think Joe Biden is corrupt or not? I'll bet you Trump gets way higher marks on a
and that's my point. That's actually what I find so distasteful about our current climate, is that a character like Biden does not face nearly the type of scrutiny that a character like Trump is facing. And it's just political polarization to its extreme, where there's fake news on both sides. And I actually think that if you look at the core of what it means to be fake news, it's actually hatred. It's hate speech, right? It's just political hate speech that allows you to distort reality to drum up emotional sentiments in people. And right. Obviously, like, both sides engage in that. I think in a democracy, we function the most healthy if we're informed about reality, if we understand the actual nature of things going on, and we're not deluded by omissions of scrutiny or over scrutiny of characters. Yeah. And I think the media bias is just outrageous. So if Trump's able to drum up the type of scrutiny that his family has faced against Joe Biden, I think Joe Biden's toast.
Yeah.
Sorry, my time. No.
I think I don't think he's toast. I think it depends on how he deals with it, because he could deal with it in a somewhat Trumpian but Joe Biden-esque type of way, that he downplays. Downplays the corruption aspect, downplays that he has anything to do with Hunter getting the job or whatever, and then he goes heavy on family and people make mistakes, and I love my son. I'm sure he's gonna, and he has said stuff like, I love my son. He's gonna make mistakes. I love him still, even when he makes mistakes. And he's just going to come off as genuine, whereas Trump comes off as kind of defiant, and it's kind of I think people are getting tired of just the same lines, and I agree with you that Trump's gotten a lot of scrutiny, obviously probably unwarranted, a good number of it. So, but when Trump's kind of just saying no collusion, there was no collusion, and the media still continues to say, well, what about this? What about that? Hey, he said there was no collusion in the report, right? People, I think, still believe something happened, or the media is leaving everybody with the impression that there was enough to question on a corruption aspect, to where Trump's still going to be on the lower end. So I agree with you on what the ideal should be, and both sides should get an equal amount of justified scrutiny. But politically, I don't think Trump's going to come out ahead on who is more corrupt, Joe Biden or Donald Trump.
So I think that's what fuels the MAGA crowd. It's that they, like me, see this disparity of scrutiny, and it just makes them outraged and makes Trump immune to attack almost. And like, I don't think I'm irrational. I criticize Trump for many things, but I'm also, like I've said for years now, equally outraged by the media bias and omissions of scrutiny and politicization of facts.
Yeah, no, it's a huge problem we have now, and that's one thing we're trying to get past in this podcast, right? That's the whole reason for us having these discussions, is trying to find some semblance of reality through both sides just calling each other out and trying to hype up the negative. So I think just with that story, we could take a very negative view of it and say it was all corruption. And it may be true that, I think it's certainly unquestionable that whoever gave Hunter Biden that job certainly was giving it to him and was hoping that, Joe Biden can do them some favors, right? So that's a big part of it. But we could hype up the negative that Joe Biden masterminded it to make himself rich, right? We could go completely down the negative road. And that's what both sides do, which I really despise. I'd rather just take a more even kill approach and say, let's see what the likelihood of what really happened here, as opposed
it's
to
jumping. It's so surprising to me how frequently people who have political power, their direct descendants tend to have political power. In our country, and this has obviously been the history of America, but I'd like to see that type of thing change.
Well,
and people to actually be doing public service.
I think it's just the same as any other job, man. Like if your dad was in real estate, probably a pretty good likelihood you're going to be in real estate too. Well, that's Trump's case right there.
Sure. Sure.
If you're a family of doctors, probably a pretty good likelihood you're going to be doing something in medicine. If you were to choose what's the most likelihood job that kid is going to do.
And that's fair. That's fair.
That's right.
Yeah. Again, it's in its own sense, it's a privilege and a burden to be born into a family like that. It's a challenge.
Yeah.
And some people rise to the occasion and become excellent people. They're trained from a very young age in a particular skill or art or business form, and they build an incredibly strong network, and they earn.
They're surrounded by politicians all the time. All their friends are politicians. All their friends' families know or are going to political parties. So, it's just kind of the nature of the environment, I think. Some people like, the Bushes, for example, always try to say, hey, go make money in business, and then you can go run for office and serve the people, Now, has that created a spiral of them all just being in politics? Probably so, but I think to some extent they're, even, I guess the Kennedys try to say that too, that they're, they all want to be in public service of some type, and the family ethos is that we have money, we should give back, and we should go serve the public in some realm, Now, does that mean that they're around more powerful people and can, manipulate power in the country for their own ends? They're certainly in a bigger position to do that. Is that their end in and of itself? Hard to say. Are they serving the public with their time and their effort and probably making less money than if they were in the private sector? Very possibly. So I don't know. A lot of people get really upset about the career politicians and everything, but part of it I see as a sacrifice. That's why, like we talk about all the time, I think it would be super hard, and I don't think I will never, run for office. Put this in a time capsule, but I don't think I'll ever run for office, just because I don't think the level of scrutiny and what you have to go through to go through that process. Some people get off on that by stoking up their ego. That's not really, I don't have a need for that, but I think the people that actually put themselves in that position go through a ton of scrutiny that they otherwise wouldn't, and it's a tough process.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's I think that's a great place to end it. Like, what a fair way to kind of battle back against what I think are going to be the attacks against Joe Biden that he can anticipate in the next few months.
Yeah. So let's end it on a. Did we change each other's minds at all?
On
I
the
don't know.
bet,
I don't think we switched the betting odds much. I don't know. Maybe did I switch your mind at all on the betting odds for Joe Biden?
I think it's the same as when we started, right? I think 3-1 is about fair. I think he's the leader, right? 3-1 in a field of 20 candidates, you're doing great.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't think I've changed. His next debate performance could be disastrous for him, or it could be awesome for him.
There's one other thing I'll leave you with too. Actually, um, is people love a comeback story. So all these people, it's brilliant. I think it's great for Joe Biden probably to have had a bad performance, which I don't think was as bad as a lot of other people do. But I think it's really good for him because it sets the bar really low for him. It probably says, oh, all the political pundits are next time are going to say, the knives are coming out for Joe Biden. He's on the canvas. Watch out. And if he just performs a little better than expectations, oh, look at how resilient Joe Biden is. He really came back. He was prepared this time. He did his homework. Like, he's back.
This is the Joe Biden we've known for 50 years. Comes out swinging. He's a street fighting politician. He's not someone who's manufactured, of course, and that could be the long-term strategy.
But
in addition, if someone like
could be,
what's that?
If he performs bad, though, it could be really bad.
It could be the end.
But the bar is lower for him for sure.
Yeah, interesting. So
at the end, these campaigns are so long. Like, how many ends did Rick Perry have in his race?
Right. So Biden entered in April, late April of this year, and he's raised 21.5 million, I guess, in the quarter. And out of all the candidates, he has the largest average contribution at $49, which I think is interesting.
Mm.
Buttigieg has actually outraised him for the quarter.
Yeah.
By 3 million and change.
Yeah, he's an interesting one. He may be actually trying to take Joe's lane. So
you think
maybe I'll take back a little bit of what I said, that he's the only one in that lane. Buttigieg is kind of trying to run in that lane, actually.
Yeah.
He's pretty young. I don't know if that's going to serve, that's a plus and minus for him.
Do you think that the Democrat Party and the media figureheads are so obsessed with identity politics that a traditional old white male politician like Joe Biden is not going to be successful in the primary?
So a lot of people have been talking about this, like the Twitter primary versus the real Democratic primary. Mm-hmm. In the Twitter primary, Joe Biden is not what they're looking for. He's out of step. But I'll bet you, unquestionably in a head-to-head with Donald Trump, they would absolutely vote for Joe Biden, no problem whatsoever. But
for sure,
the real primary, and also for the Obama voters that voted for Trump, which there's seemingly a lot of those people, Joe Biden is a perfect candidate for them. They like, who he is, what he speaks to, and, those are Joe's people. Like, so he's in a good position as far as the general would go, in my opinion.
Do you think the busing critique will continue, or do you think everyone's over that?
Good question. I think I don't think that's going to have a lot of legs to it, because that's such a weird, complex issue anyway. Like even I was reading.
You probably think that just his service with Barack Obama, who is an extremely popular African-American president.
Even just, well, the busing issue was like, if you go back to it, it was even unpopular by like both sides at the time. Like, so you're taking, white kids out of white schools and then taking them to other schools, with more minorities and black kids, and then you're taking black kids out of their schools and taking them more to, white schools. So you're getting them away from their comfort level. Their people know what is that good? Maybe, but it's nobody really probably like that is from what I understand, just reading the history of it. So
But I mean, I think if you have your finger on the pulse of where the Democratic Party is, and maybe your point about that's the pulse on Twitter and not the party at large. But I saw a YouTube star, Tim Black, who I think is really entertaining. He had a critique of Biden, where he said that Biden sounded like a presentable racist. And he was talking about the busing issue in particular. And Biden's argument at the time was that forcing white people's kids to go to school with black kids would, quote, fill them with hatred, fill the white people with hatred who have to send their kids to school with black people. And of course, this is like many decades ago, but I don't know these days if that's an absolvable sin. Clearly, that's an absurd position with where our sentiments should be today, I think.
I think the sentiments, yes, but maybe he was just kind of trying to say that that's probably more of a reality. Let's just say you have a white kid and, I live in Denver metro area, like in a suburb, really good school in Denver metro, and then you tell them you have to go to a poor performing school in the inner city or something like that. Does that bridge gaps? I don't know.
What it does,
I think ideally the intent is correct, right? You need to interact more and everything.
I think exactly. I think it's like how cities in America function. If you're an affluent city with rich, powerful constituencies, you've got great plumbing and great public utilities, and the fire department's there in 2 seconds if you got a problem. And if you live in a poor community like Flint, Michigan, you're drinking poison and a generation goes by until anyone lifts a finger to really help you. And so if you do take the white kids out of their white schools and integrate them, it democratizes the power dynamic in a way that benefits everyone. And I think the old politicians, the paradigm I want to get away from is that paradigm. I want to be an America that really thinks about the spreading out the power to the people in a diverse representative way that doesn't allow for these generational power inequities that I think just they've got catastrophic effects for individuals and communities.
Yeah.
And, I think Biden is from the generation where that was acceptable.
So, yeah, I don't know. I think it's a tough issue because like Biden was basically saying, and maybe he had some, more opinions on this that I don't know about, but like he's basically saying, no, my position was that it's up to the local school district to decide how they want to handle the situation. So he's just basically making a federal, but Kamala Harris had a good comeback to him. She said, hey, we have the Civil Rights Act and Brown versus Board of Education. Sometimes these local politicians and local issues don't serve the public need, and you need the federal government to step in and tell them there's inequities here, right? So that was a tremendous comeback and a great, valid, true point by her. So I don't know, man. I think maybe it does have more legs now that we're talking about it than I probably would have given it credit for. Although I think it's better for him to have this discussion now, early in the campaign, because he's basically apologized for this now. Now, will he have to apologize again and again? Maybe. And he probably can just say, I'm sorry. And then it probably will be over more than likely. I don't know that we'll be talking about this in a month or two or right before the New Hampshire primary or Iowa caucuses. I don't think this will be one of the major issues that we're discussing at the time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I would love to see an America that has a more stoic scrutiny of our public officials instead of impassioned politicization of it. And in a way, I think, but Biden prides himself on being that diplomatic public servant who understands power and presents himself in a charismatic way.
So the interesting thing about that whole, debate or discussion on this issue is, and even just the blowback of, is Joe Biden a racist because he was working with outspoken segregationists at the time. And I don't know if it was over those issues or he was just saying I worked on other issues like taxes or something with them. But they were bad people. I still found good things to do with them on maybe taxes or Medicare or who knows what else he was working with them on, right? That still kind of signals and reinforces Joe Biden's ethos and character of who he wants to be. He wants to be the guy that bridges the gaps and brings people together. And like we talked about earlier, you're talking to the people that don't agree with you. Maybe Joe Biden would say this, perhaps, is maybe me working with them on taxes brings more goodwill and a better relationship with them so that I can bring them along on race issues better when we have that discussion, right? I think that's probably what Joe Biden would say is us working on those issues builds a better relationship and builds trust so that they will trust me, my opinion and judgment to help bring them along on race issues. And that's kind of plays to Joe Biden's main character and persona in the campaign. So I don't know that does him a huge disservice. It's out of step, sure, with like the main Democratic Party right now, but it could be, still playing to his main persona.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like we said, it plays to that longer narrative that maybe he got away from in the first debate because he was underprepared. The only other concern I'd have is his stamina. Whether he's, and I mean, he'll manage it. He's skipped events and things like that, where other candidates are eager to go, but he feels like he's got a comfortable lead and he can take the day off or go to a private farm.
Probably should, take your time more now, rest up for the sprints ahead.
I've noticed that the Obamas have been reluctant to publicly endorse him or even support him from the Kamala Harris attacks. But I get it. I think that's a politically calculated move on Biden's campaign's part.
For sure. I think maybe if and when, maybe Obama will sit out the whole race potentially. But it doesn't make any sense for him to come out and support Joe big now or endorse him now. You hold that for like a week before Iowa or something like that, get people really excited at the end. So there's plenty of time for that. I think Biden will probably receive some Obama help along the way here and there in like little one-off comments here and there that we'll hear about. But I don't think there's any need or political strategy need for him to come out now. By the way, since we're getting close to the end, this is funny because I was drinking out of this coffee cup and it's like an elephant. It's not because I'm a Republican. My girlfriend has like tons of these mugs of all different, like, Mr. Potato Head and watermelon mug. She's got like 40 different types of mugs. So I didn't buy this. This is hers. I didn't buy this, nor did she, because I'm a Republican and that's all I think about or whatever. It was kind of funny because I happen to have this one today. So, anything else of note, Jay Fish, or should we end this?
I'm not drinking out of a blue cup because I'm a big Democrat. I'm just saying.
Nice. Yeah, this is a blue elephant at least, so it's not like a red elephant. Sure. So I guess there's that. But actually, that's kind of cool. Now that I think about it, it's a blue elephant.
Yeah.
This could be the signatory thing, like
You know what? Even better, I'd say
liberal
purple.
Republican or something.
A purple elephant.
Yeah, it actually does kind of look purple. So it's like a bluish purple.
Awesome. Well, I think that's probably pretty close to where we are politically too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Generally. Awesome talk, man, as always. I appreciate it.
Jay Fish, thanks for doing this, man. We'll do it again.
Awesome. Thanks, Brett.